The Other Chronicles of Robin Hood, Part 2, The Archer and the Arrow. Good evening, friends. In our last tale, we followed Robin and his merry band as they sought refuge in the mighty Sherwood Forest, away from Nottingham, the greedy Prince John, and the cruel sheriff. As Robin Hood took from the rich and gave to the poor, the prince and the sheriff plotted to capture Robin in a trap, an archery contest with a golden prize. Will Robin show up to claim his place as the best archer in Nottingham? The forest was buzzing the next morning as the news spread. An archery contest, announced by the sheriff himself, to be held at the castle's fairground. Grand prize, a golden arrow, open to all. To some people in Nottingham it sounded like a celebration, but to Robin Hood and his merry band, it was a trap wrapped up in a pretty gold ribbon. "I don't know about this one, Rob," said Little John, stroking his beard. "I'm all for giving that devil of a sheriff what he deserves, but I think we could sit this one out." "It's bait," said Marion, "and I've never known you to be foolish enough to swallow a hook, even one that glints gold." Robin was quiet for a moment. He stood in a clearing in Sherwood Forest, the sun painting golden stripes through the leaves. His bow rested in his hands. A breeze tugged at his cloak. He looked at his friends with a knowing glance. "The thing about a trap is that if the trapper isn't careful, they just might get caught themselves," Robin said. "I am shooting for that golden arrow, but Robin Hood won't be pulling the bowstring." He smiled, a sly, sideways smile that always meant trouble for the sheriff. That night, by firelight, the merry band gathered to make a plan. Friar Tuck, chicken leg in one hand and heavy hammer in the other, was telling a story about the time that the sheriff's men came to his church to collect taxes. They had left with several bruises, but no gold. Everyone had heard it 100 times, but it was one of their favorite stories. The number of bruises had a funny way of increasing each time he told the story. Much stitched a patch onto a worn traveler's hood and tried it on for good measure. Will was carefully honing the edge of his sword. It was sharp enough to shave the hairs on a peach. Marion carefully fletched an arrow with a white swan feather. Even as she focused on her task, she could not hide the hint of concern on her face. Meanwhile, Little John was helping Robin into a tattered jacket, dirty and ragged. Robin looked nothing like Robin. He was hunched over like an old man, his face smudged and wrinkled with disguise, his red hair hidden beneath a scarf. Even his voice changed, soft and scratchy, like dry leaves blowing across a road. "Don't forget," Marion warned as she placed the arrow in his quiver. "The sheriff will have eyes everywhere." Robin nodded. "Don't worry, sweet Marion. If he is focused on finding Robin Hood, he will never see you coming until it is too late." The fairground outside Nottingham Castle was bursting with color. Flags flapped in the breeze, merchants shouted in striped tents, children laughed, nobles strutted, and guards paced with spears in hand. But at the center of it all stood a long wooden platform, and at the far end, twinkling in the sunlight, was the target, a white circle with red rings and a golden bullseye no bigger than a coin. Beside it, under a silk canopy, sat Prince John on a massive oak throne. He was draining a golden goblet of wine as he stared in disgust at the peasants walking past. Beside him sat the sheriff, draped in black and perched like a vulture, waiting for his next rotting meal. The sheriff leaned forward, scanning the line of archers. "Which one is he?" he hissed. "Could be any of them. Could be none of them. Only time will tell," Prince John said. The sheriff clenched his jaw. "He'll be here. I can smell him." One by one, archers stepped forward. Some were good, arrows landing near the center. Some were terrible, arrows flying into hay bales or even bouncing off into the crowd. One poor fellow tried 3 times to knock his arrow before a booing crowd made him so nervous that he loosed it and it struck the prince's tent. Needless to say, he was given a free escort to the sheriff's dungeons to think about his failed shot. People laughed, coins changed hands as favorites were chosen, and the sheriff tapped his fingers impatiently. "Stop that," Prince John snapped. "That aimless drumming will not bring your target to you quicker, but it will make me lose my temper." The sheriff scowled and slouched in his chair. Almost without notice, a small, hunched figure limped into view in front of the platform. He wore a tattered cloak, he had a scarf over his mouth, and he was using a crooked walking stick. "Name," barked the guard. The figure coughed. "Hobbs de Fletcher be me name, from Derbyshire." The sheriff sat up a little straighter. "Remember, I told you he was clever. Cruel, but clever." The old man took his place, slowly. With creaking hands, he raised his bow. He notched an arrow, pulled back the string, and let it fly. The arrow sailed through the air, silent, swift, spinning, thunk. Bullseye, dead center, not just touching the gold, but splitting the gold mark right down the middle. The crowd exploded in cheers. "Pretty good shot there, old man," the sheriff snapped, rising from his chair. Robin bowed low. "Just an old woodsman, sir," he rasped. He turned to walk away, but the sheriff shouted, "Seize him!" 24 guards swarmed toward Robin, but in that very moment, chaos. A loud bang echoed across the fairground as a carriage erupted from behind the crowd, pulled by 2 galloping horses, sending people running as barrels and railings flew into the air. From behind the massive oak throne that the prince sat in, a bright steel blade emerged against the sheriff's throat. Marion's silky voice muttered in his ear, "Looking for someone?" Friar Tuck appeared from behind a cart, swinging his giant hammer. He caught one unlucky guard with a glancing blow, sending the man stumbling off as his helm rang. Much tossed a bag amongst the guards, a bag that, as it turns out, contained a very large hornet's nest, and the hornets were quite angry. The guards scrambled, pulling at their armor as the hornets took their vengeance out with 100 tiny stings. Will was locked in a vicious battle with 2 guards, parrying their swords with a loud clang as sparks filled the air. And Robin, he stood tall now, cloak thrown off, scarf pulled down, red hair shining in the sun. He leapt on the stage, pulling a sword as he rushed toward the prince and the sheriff. The sheriff grinned evilly as he threw himself back against Marion, at the same time grabbing her wrist. As fast as she was, the sheriff was able to seize her before she could react. Prince John stood up from his throne, reaching for the hilt of a golden sword as he released the stem of his goblet. Robin didn't care. The king could have 1,000 blades at his back. He had to get to Marion. At that moment, a powerful swing of Friar Tuck's hammer took out the front support of the pavilion, and the stage lurched as the oak throne's substantial weight shifted. Robin saw his chance, sliding past the sheriff's guard as he struggled to keep his balance with the struggling Marion in his hands. Robin struck the outside of the sheriff's knee with the pommel of his sword. The sheriff released Marion as his leg crumpled beneath him. Marion, finding herself free, and further finding that the prince, perhaps having had too much wine, had fallen down in front of her as the stage tilted forward, brought her own knee up and smashed it into the prince's nose. The golden crown flipped up in the air, and Marion caught it in her free hand. Robin knew that they had just a quick moment to make their escape. As the sheriff growled through gritted teeth and stared at Robin with pure hatred in his eyes, Robin plucked the golden arrow from the floor and reached out toward Marion. Together, They jumped from the lurching stage and into the wagon that Little John reined in beside them. "Go!" Robin shouted as Much, Will, and Tuck jumped into the back of the wagon. Little John wheeled the wagon around as fast as the horses could carry it, arrows zipping past like angry wasps. Robin turned around just long enough to catch the sheriff's eye. "Thanks for the arrow," he called. Later that night, back in Sherwood Forest, the fire crackled, the kettle boiled, and laughter filled the clearing. Robin stood up by the great oak, the golden arrow now tucked into his quiver. "It was never about the prize," he said. "It was about reminding them we're still here." Marian smiled. "And that you're the best archer in England." Robin grinned. "That too." Things were silent for a moment, and then Robin cleared his throat and said, "Marian, I want to, You're not about to apologize to me, Robin, like I'm some damsel in distress." "Of course not," said Robin sheepishly. "You are certainly not defenseless. It's just, if I had lost you today, or John, or Tuck, or Will..." He fell silent as she reached over and took his hand. "Robin, you have never forced us to do anything. We choose to fight with you. The people of Nottingham choose to stand with you. Every person who comes here to stay in Sherwood stays with you because we believe in something bigger than you." He squeezed her hand tightly. "Besides," she said, "that old rotten prince and his lapdog sheriff will need to work harder than that to keep us apart." They sat together beneath the branches, watching as the stars blinked away in the sky. Around them, the merry band sang songs, roasted meat, and shared stories of the day. The loud voices rang out late into the night. But beyond the forest, in the cold stone halls of Nottingham Castle, the sheriff limped back and forth, growling like a wolf in a cage. "I hate him," he yelled, his voice echoing through the room. "Had he or not, he has yet again escaped your clutches, Sheriff," the prince said, his crooked, swollen nose still bleeding through the cloth he held to his face. "I am starting to lose my patience with these interruptions in our plans." "This isn't over," the sheriff snarled. "I will catch him." "I don't want you to catch him, you fool," said the prince. "I want his head. I want him destroyed. I want you to kill him." The sheriff painfully made his way to the window, staring out at the dark shadows that represented the edge of Sherwood Forest. "Gladly." Guys, the fire's dying low, and it's time for us to say goodnight. But next week, we'll continue our story as Marian gets caught in one of the sheriff's traps. How will she escape? How will she let Robin know that she needs help? Will the merry band get there in time? Good night, friends.